Uy, andyan na pala kayo. Ayan na, ayan na. May mga developments na naman tayo dito sa Pilipinas. Kamusta kayo dyan? Of course, as I promised, pag-usapan natin. Marami tayong pag-usapan. Mamaya, si John Arcilia, aka ex-General Luna, future Rizal. Pag-usapan din natin si LENI base dun sa aking column for Philippine Daily Inquirer. But I want to really put it in a bigger context. No? Ang title dyan is LENI's Revolution, A Second Chance. And of course, I'm not only referring here dun sa 1986 People Power's Revolt against the former Marcos dictatorship, but ang pinag-usapan din natin dito is a century-old struggle, more than a century-old struggle na ito ay pwede natin ibalik all the way sa panahon ng mga Gomburza, dun sa execution ni Padre Jose Burgos, all the way to Philippine Revolution against the Spanish, our resistance to the American occupation, and all the way to the anti-dictatorship struggle in the 70s and 80s. And then, yung mga efforts more recently to make sure na we'll get back on track and actually embody yung true spirit ng hindi lang EDSA revolution, but yung mga, you know, the things that Rizal and General Luna and that whole generation was fighting for, no? Kind of national collective dignity, a certain degree of autonomy. At saka, of course, as Rizal and the rest wanted it, is true freedom. Freedom not only from oppression and tyranny externally, but freedom also from ignorance, right? Freedom from hatred and prejudice. So, comprehensive total freedom. Yun po ang gusto ni Rizal. So, pag-usapan natin later on yan. Before that, let's have a little bit of more higher level discussion. Unang-una, mukhang suspendido ang spokesman ni Perfect Attendance. Yung Facebook account yata ay medyo suspendido. Ay nako, alam na natin pag nasususpend ng account, most likely, I mean, of course, there are certain cases kung saan may mistake, etc. Yung account ko for a while, may bug yata or something na inayos ng Facebook. Minsan, it could be some overzealous, let's just call it regulation. But a lot of times, nasususpend yung account kung alam na natin. Alam natin bakit nasususpend yung account. Baka kung ano na naman sinishare, kung ano-ano nang pinagsasabi. Naku po, spokesman pa lang, nasususpend na ako. Paano kung anong amo nung... Ayan na. Ayan talaga yung level natin. So, ito yung nagtitrending kanina. Ayan. Tapos ang sabi niya, sinuspend daw siya kasi sinusupport niya si Perfect Attendance. This is censorship of the highest degree and interference on a sovereign act. Parang, I'm not sure dun sa preposition niya. Ito rin ba yung nagsusulat ng mga PR ni Perfect Attendance na parang, paki-edit na nga to yung syntax at, never mind yung poetry and prose, yung ano lang naman sana, diba? Medyo konting effort. Nasuspend ng Meta, mga ka-Meta, nasuspend na po yung account ng spokesman ng Alamano. Ayan na. Ayan, nakalagay, we suspended your account. Your account or activity on it doesn't follow our community standards. Alam natin yung mga standards sa Facebook. Don't spread disinformation. Don't spread hate speech. Don't spread, tuloy nawala si Trump. But speaking of that, kanina nalaman natin si Elon Musk na magte-take over ng Twitter. Nako po. Siyempre, yung mga supporters ni Elon Musk, excited. At pag tignan mo dyan, siguro 90% ng mga high-level supporters na yung mga Trumpers. USA! Yung mga ganon. Excited na sila na makabalik si Donald Trump sa Twitter. At medyo may sinasabi si Elon Musk dito na, I'm here for... Pasahin nga natin mga sinisulat ni, mga drama ni Elon Musk kanina. Natulog lang tayo ng konti. Pagkasing natin, iba na yung may-ari ng Twitter. Walang niya. Hindi ko na nalaload si Elon Musk. Wait lang. Free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy, and Twitter is a digital town square where matters vital to the future of humanity are debated. Tuloy, gusto niya i-privatize yung Twitter. I also want to make Twitter better than ever by enhancing the product with new features, etc. Okay, yeah. In fairness, kung may edit options, mga ekek na ganun, I welcome that, Elon. Go ahead. Do it. Pero ito yung sinabi ko sa kanya, Ito yung comment ko sa kanya kanina. Sabi ko, if talagang free speech ang sinusupport mo, I'm all for it. But free speech, I hope, doesn't include hate speech. And alam natin, yung hate speech has a very specific legal, moral, ethical implication and connotation. No? So, looks like it's just a matter of time before ma-reinstate yung mga Trumpers. No? Yun nga, wala akong problema, mag-express mo yung sarili mo, my opinion, my onion, whatever. But if this is hate speech, this is about calling for violence. This is calling for hatred and calumny against a specific group, especially minorities, especially those who fight for freedom of expression. That's abuse of freedom against freedom itself. No? So yun, sana hindi yung inaabuso yung concept ng freedom of speech. Kasi freedom of speech does not include libel, salacious commentaries na more or less alam na natin yan, diba? Hindi rin kasama dyan yung call to genocide and violence and all. That's not freedom of speech. That's abuse of speech. That's hate speech. Hindi po pwede yan. Ewan ko kay Elon Musk. I don't think he's a guy very familiar with political philosophy. Clearly, he's a geek or nerd, whatever you want to call him. He's a engineering, programming nerd. So minsan yung mga pinagsasabi niya na are very self-serving. Of course, he wouldn't understand it. He comes from a privileged background. I mean, he comes from South Africa, and he comes from the privileged class in South Africa. So I don't think he understands what hate speech means for minorities. Kung naman dyan, Mark Zuckerberg. Baka matuwa si Mark kasi medyo inana natin yung bagong may-ari ng Twitter. Ayan. Now, we can talk more about that, but let's not forget, Elon Musk is a businessman too. He has business interests in China. He has business interests in many countries with very questionable human rights record. So, ang tanong ng ibang journalist dyan is, what if those countries say, medyo imasahe mo yung mga algorithms, kunyari, dyan sa mga issues about Xinjiang, Uyghurs, who knows, South China Sea, whatever. So, this is the problem. May conflict of interest potentially also there. But, okay, may bagong may-ari ng Twitter. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's see. And in fairness to Elon Musk, he brings in some exciting stuff. Hindi siya nagsimula ng Tesla, but when he took over it aggressively, just as what he did in Twitter, in fairness, he upgraded it. And he knows how to do PR. Mahusay siya sa PR. Now, he's not a very good speaker, but he's a good PR guy. He knows how to get it done. So let's see. Hopefully, my edit option, my new option, Twitter gets more exciting. But let's see. I think many people are on the edge. Because the worry here is that freedom of speech will be abused here to let in yung mga high engagement Trumpers of the world back into Twitter. And my goodness, I remember the days when Twitter was dominated by the Trumpers type. My goodness. Ibang klase yan. So let's be clear, hate speech is not an expression of freedom of speech. It's an abuse of freedom of speech. Let's be very, very clear about that. Okay? So yon, mamaya tignan natin. Anyway, good luck, Elon Musk. Let's see what you're gonna do. I hope hindi mo gawin I hope medyo bawas-bawasan mo yung pagtatroll mo. Di ba tinawagan niya ng pedo yung nagre-rescue sa Thailand na nagda-diver na porkit question niya siya. Kasi medyo may epal naman kasi ito si Elon Musk. Dorky ka tapos hamunin mo pa si Putin sa one-on-one fight. I mean, tuloy, tinarasya lang ng Russian. Parang what? Nakita niya magsayaw Tesla, ganyan siya magsayaw. Talagang, this guy has never mind. Okay. Now, meron akong very serious na tanong. Please, guys. Please. Meron akong very, very serious na tanong. Alam ko yung lighting is bad now. My tiredness is more seen. At saka medyo sumobra yata yung natin dyan. Ano po yung hamburger ni bakit yung mga unit team, supporters. May parati may hamburger. Tapos nakita ko sa video isang araw na parang andun si Sar without H. Hamburger. Ganun siya. What's that all about? Can anyone explain to me what's the whole hamburger thing all about? Ayan tayo sa mga hamburger natin. Kaya hindi ko talaga maintindihan yan, yung hamburger. Paki-explain sa akin, ha? Basahin ko mamaya. Pero yun, ito again, huwag kayo mag-freedom of speech yan. Tapos ang gagawin nyo lang, mag-hate speech lang kayo dyan and call for violence and anger and all. At yung mga vloggers dyan, walang ya. Yung mga nag-spread ng disinformation sa atin, sinisira tayo kung deliberately to discredit us. Walang ya. Bahala ng Diyos sa inyo. In the meantime, on Earth, let's see also, walang iya talaga yung mga yan. Kahapon, dun sa TikTok, may pinost tayo yung latest na article, latest na interview ko sa Al Jazeera where I discuss how this upcoming election is the most consequential in Philippine history, at least since 1969 elections. And then may sinabi ako dyan na, ito yung TikTok ko, ito. Medyo nag-trending na ito to eh. Dito, sabi ko, kasi parati tinanong ito sa akin, what are the issues being discussed? Yung mga ek-ek na gano'n. At saka ako, sabi ko, okay, of course, alam natin base sa Pulse Asia, for instance, the top issues are gut issues, right? Inflation, education, employment. Actually, employment, I think, second, ngayon, more recently. And then, of course, andun din yung aspeto ng ayusin yung infrastruktura, yung sa urgent issues, and then, of course, yung pandemic, yung healthcare, among others, no? Given na yan. But, my point is, alam na natin ang yung issues. Marami sa mga candidates puro motherhood statements. Tapos kung titignan mo naman si Perfect Attendance, hindi man lang nag-attend sa isang single COMELEC organized debate or any of those credible organizations, platform organized debates. Mga ganun. So may sinabi ako dyan na how can you say, it's hard to say how issues specifically are driving voter preference when the front runner per surveys, has not attended a single presidential public debate of note. Of note. So I made the caveat very clear. And I'm sorry, the rule number one, if you want to be a legit media, is that hindi dapat yung mayari mo ay, diba? Hindi most wanted. Hindi nag-openly endorse ng candidate na i-host mo. Di ba? Mga ganun. Tapos yung mga good Machiavelli, the professor, mga panel, hindi yung I'll send you my paper, mga ganun. Hindi ganun. Hindi yan legit, di ba? Tapos yung iba dyan, bakit niyo inbita si Darian? Ba't di niyo inbita si ganito? Sabi ko, syempre mga yan ay SMNI. Resident analyst mga yan. So, medyo hindi kayang level ng mga yan. Medyo high level masyado eh. Medyo high level yung mga resident analyst ng So, sorry, hindi ma-invita ng CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC, mga yan. Sorry na lang. Kaya, medyo high level masyado. So, yun lang. Yung iba dyan, paki-research. When I say off-note, you should know what that means. Ayan tayo eh. So ano yung explanation dun sa hamburgers? Hamburger. Yan. Sour without H. Hindi ko alam ano yung context nun. Pero ang dami ko nakikita na hamburgers pag nagko-comment yung mga unit team natin dyan. No? Di pala tayo nag-greetings, guys, ha? Di tayo nag-greetings. Kamusta naman kayo dyan? Mga ating mga ka-Pacman, ka-Antman, kakamping, ka-isko, yan, lahat ng mga yan. Ganda nung kanta niya, anong pangalan anak ni Gary V? Si Gab ba yun? Si Gab yan? Gabriel, di ba? Di ba meron siyang kantang ganon? Sinong presidente? Ganon yung crowd. Vice presidente. Tapos, Kiko, mga ganon, di ba? Sabi ko siguro may ibang version. Sinong presidente? GMRC. Vice presidente? Tito Boy Soto. Yan. Sabi ko, pwede rin gawin na different versions yan. Tapos, Gabi, sino presidente? GMRC. Yon! Yan. Gawa rin ako ng mga moves dyan. Ayan. Kailangan ko na mag-glasses kasi medyo may pa yung mga. At saka, nakikita niyo yung eye box ko. Sorry na lang dyan sa mga kaibigan natin dyan. Ayan. Sino presidente? GMRC. Tito Boy. Yan. Oy, speaking of Tito Boy, hindi si Tito Soto, Tito Boy. Ayan. Alam ko yung difference. Meron siyang interview kay Luke Espiritu at saka mga ibang senatorial candidates. So, panoorin yan, ha? Maganda yan. Sabi ni Chadoint Serrano, which doesn't look like a very, very legit account. Sorry na lang kung legit ka. Pero yung comments may hindi legit. Ayan. Bias daw yan. Ano po yung bias? Paki-explain nga sa akin. Kasi kung ang bias ay yung ayaw sa kasinungalingan, sa madanakaw, ayaw mga alam niyo na, mga mga invento, mga ganon. So ang bias na gusto niya kasinungalingan. Paki-Google lang ibig sabihin ng bias. Bias means tilting towards something. If you're tilting towards truth and facts, then that's a good bias. If you're tilting towards kaiwanan at syungan, then iba na yan, di ba? Oo. Uy, may kanina, in fairness, speaking of Andrew E. Andrew E. Biglang nakita ko may Andrew E. TikTok na very nice. Very nice. Ito, papanorin ko sa inyo. The best yan. The best yan. Sa sobrang the best, video ko yan. Ito. Tuwan-tuwa ako dito, promise. Yan, ulit. Yeah! Go, Andrew E! Yeah! Ayan na, ilabas na yung mga dyan. Yan. Nakita niya ito. Nag-trending ko rin sa TikTok Yan. Ulitin natin. One more time. One more time, guys. Ito. Narinig niyo ba? Yung kanta ni Andrew E. dyan? Bagong Pilipinas. Ayan. Ito. Ulitin natin. Bagong Pilipinas. Okay to. Maganda to, guys. Woo! Andrew E, man. Woo! Yan. Gusto ko yung mga ganun. Yan. Yan tala, Andrew E, man. Man, represent, yo. Andrew E. Sino Presidente? GMRC. Vice-Presidente. Tito Boy Soto. Ayan na. Hindi ko talaga kaya hamburger na yan. Yan talagang levels natin ngayon, guys. Yan ang level natin. Kaya sabi ko nga, yung mga galit na bakit akong ininbita ng mga international level, syempre hindi nila ma-reach yung SMNI, resident analyst. SMNI, presidential debate panelist. Yan, mga ganon level. Mga main panelist. Yo! Kamusta dyan, mga kaibigan natin from Mexico, Pampanga? Kamusta kayo dyan? Yan. Ano ba yung mga ibang version ng Mexico, Pampanga? Baka naman. Hindi na kailangan passport dyan. Pwede tayo pumasok. Ulitin, hindi ko talaga kaya ito The best talaga ito. Isa pa. Yeah! Go, Andre! Wala na. Awanin talaga. Huwag kayong magalit sa akin. I'm just prepping you up for medyo malalim ang maging discussion natin. Kaya kailangan ko kayo i-prepare. Medyo maging nosebleed tayo soon. Hindi ko na... Panoorin nyo talaga. Isa pa, na ako na LSS. Ayan. Sino Presidente? GMRC. Yeah. Yan. Grabe, smooth ang moves talaga. Kaya, Andrea, next elections, baka naman, pwede na kayo magsama ni Senator Robin P. Para naman. Yeah. Okay. Medyo seryoso na tayo. Mga ka-burger dyan. Mga ka-ano dyan. Okay. Ito na. Going back. Ako, you know, I'm a man of my words. Ito yung notes natin. Nandito na tayo sa isang item. Ayan, hamburger. Yan. Sino president? Ayan, okay. Okay. Ito yung Ferrari ulit eh. Gaganan yung Ferrari, biglang, yan naman ito mo. Yeah! Okay. Balikan natin itong ano natin dyan, ha? Yan. Ito yung article natin today. LENI's Revolution. Yan! A second chance. Yan. Second chance. Mga ganun dapat ang mood. Tama na, move on na tayo dyan sa Android. Tama na. Hoy, seryoso na, move on na tayo. Naalala ko ito, matatawa na naman ako. Di ko maseryoso itong. Guys, serious tayo. Come on. Don't do this to me. Mga hamburger. Mga kaano. Huwag na kayo ganyan. Move on na tayo. Patayin ko ulit yung Android. Kulit eh. Ayan o. Yeah. Okay. Mamaya na tayo dun sa ano ni version TikTok ni sino presidente GMRC. Ayan. Tapos na, wag na tayo magano ha. Okay. Alright. That's greatest show in the world. Yan ang dapat gagawin natin dito. Okay. Let's go. Let's do this. Ayan na. Let's go. Okay. So as I told you, parang kanta yan. Para sa akin, John Arcelia's speech was the most impassioned public address I've heard throughout the election process. I mean, in fairness to the guy, God bless him. In fairness. Again, kung sincere ka at passionate ka, even if I don't agree with you, even if medyo, ewan ko na sa mga hamburger dyan, I will give it to you, man. I'm willing to listen, right? So, in fairness to the guy, itong beginning na article natin, quote, corrupt or honest, plunderer or servant, of course, not translate sa English. Those who are absent or those who show up, perfect attendance. Those who soldier on or those who retreat. Tamad boy. Hardworking or lazy. Yan. Recto. Diploma. My country you choose. Ayan. Bayan, pumili ka. Yan ang sinabi ni General Luna. Ayan. At ito talagang gusto ko sa sinabi niya. Ito talaga ang core ng sinasabi ko nung isang araw pa. Parang nakikinig yata si General Luna sa atin. Parang kutob ko medyo meron akong konting suspicion. Ulitin natin tong kanta ni Andrew E. Okay, tama. Okay. Balikan natin. Okay. Itong talagang para sa akin ng this one got my attention. Sabi niya, hindi namin sinasanto si LENI. We do not worship Vice President Leni Robredo. We do not sanctify Leni Robredo. Hindi namin sinasanto, hindi namin sabi niya, we love her because she loves our country. So ang basehan dito is yung pagmamahal sa bayan. Or yung perception niya ng meron pagmamahal sa bayan yung kandidato na yan, who happened to be, of course, the birthday girl noon sa Macapagal Avenue Grand Rally over the weekend. So happy birthday ulit dyan kay duly elected Vice President Leni Robredo. Happy birthday din kay Mommy. I hope you had a good time, Mother. Yon. On your special day, kahapon. Ayan. Tapos sabi ko nga dito, ito yung magandang sinabi ni John Arcelia. Our responsibility as Filipinos, yung ating responsibilidad bilang mga Pilipino, does not end there. Ito yung sinasabi ko parate, meaning does not end dun sa ballot box, dun sa elections. We need to watch over her so our dreams and her promises will be fulfilled. So let us not desert her upon being seated. Kutob ko nakikinig sa Kameta yata natin to si John Arcelia. Kutob ko kameta natin yan. Ayan. Kameta, General Luna. Yan. Tama, yan ang sinasabi ko. Win or lose, kung magaling o kandidato mo, kung sino man yan, Kailangan talaga ng movement for change. Oo. Yun ang talagang kailangan natin. Hindi ang mga troll movement, hindi troll farms movement. Yung totoong tao organic, nag-iisip, may pagmamahal sa bayan, yan. Yan, respect my opinion daw. Yan. Yun ang pinaka nagustuhan ko dyan sa sinabi niya. Again, this is not an endorsement of what he said or endorsing what he was endorsing. This is an analysis, textual analysis pang ginagawa natin dito. So, ang point ko dito is, what is being contended here is that LENI's candidacy is not simply a repackaged electoral campaign by the discredited factions of the ruling elite, but instead a new and transformational movement aimed at nothing less than saving a besieged democracy. In short, ang pink movement po ay hindi repackaging lang ng Dilawan. Now, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but it's actually a new movement altogether with a lot of people there who are there for LENI, not for Liberal Party, not for bringing back what was there before Duterte, not for all of the supine reformism and all of that, and of course some of the good stuff also, but they're there for something radically progressive, radical, something different, a real break with the discredited more recent past. At the same time, ito yung mga tao na hindi gusto bumalik sa super past. Ayaw bumalik dun sa, parang may problema ka sa jowa mo ngayon, huwag kang tumalon dun sa dato mong ex na kaya nga hiniwalayan mo kasi di ba? Ito na naman tayo. Dun sa nostalgia, guys. Pinag-usapan natin ng nostalgia. Ito mag-review tayo. Mga natutunan natin, interregnum, median voter, nostalgic populism, and authoritarian nostalgia. Related yung dalawang concept na yan. In-explain ko dalawang yan. And then, of course, meron din akong minention, may nagtanong sa akin, yung tinatawag ko na, yung what I term as diminishing elasticity, right, of voter preference. Now, medyo pwede natin pag-usapan maybe tomorrow or another day. So elasticity yung pwedeng malleable, di ba? Medyo pag ganun. So, diminishing elasticity mean na yung pwedeng pagbabago or magbago yung isip ng voters ay bumababa habang we get closer to the election day, right? Unless some significant developments happen today. So yan, may mga concept na yan. And then may pinag-usapan din tayong kahapon, di ba? Yung what I call, makapal ang mukha ako, I coin things on my own. Yung kinon kong isa, Duterte Garks, nag-click yun. Ayan, ginagamit na siya. Kinall out ko yung mga hindi nagbibigay ng credit. Ako po ang gumawa ng konsepto na yan, Duterte Garks. Mga oligarchs ni tatay. Alright. Alam na this. So yun, yung concept ng policy equilibrium. The idea is that if you're a good leader, you're president, you lead a movement, yung movement mo should be as inclusive as possible. And the goal here is not to give concessions or to try to please everyone. You can never please everyone. In fact, things go wrong when you try to please everyone. Ang gagawin mo dyan is yung pinag-usapan natin classroom, di ba? Venn diagram. So, ito yung kunyari. Ito ang dilaw, ito pula, let's say ito blue, ito whatever. This color, I'm just saying colors for the sake of it. It doesn't have any ideological. Ang kukunin mo yung area na nag-overlap lahat ng mga circles na yan. So, mag-Venn diagram analysis ka. And then, depending on priorities, facts on the ground, political coalition dynamics, you a little bit tilt a little bit here, tilt a little bit there. But at the end of the day, to be an inclusive leader, you're not there to impress everyone of all persuasions. That is not your job. Because once you try to do that, you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot. Kasi sabihin natin, ito. You wanna please the masses. So you increase social welfare. Automatically, you won't please the business class or upper middle class because that means higher taxes for them. You cannot have both at the same time. Walang free lunch sa economics, sa economic policy. There are always what we call trade-offs. Right? Trade-offs. Alright. Ayan, nagre-review lang tayo balikan natin ito si General Luna. Now, itong sabihin ko si John Arcilla, matagal ko pinapanood yan because, I'll be honest, I started observing him for very political reasons because I think he has had very outsized impact on our political culture over the past 6 or 7 years. A few years ago, during a discussion I had, balikan ko, don't worry, yung si LENI and all of that, don't worry. Na-realize ko dun sa isang discussion namin with yung friend ko, colleague natin si Dr. Leloy Cloud, yun sa UC Berkeley yun, isa siyang historiador, I think that's the term, right? Sa atin. At nag-realize kami, na-realize namin separately, na si General Luna ay parang ginaya ni Tatay Digong noong 2016 elections. That's our hunch. Kasi naalala ko talaga nung nasa cinema kami, ninanood kami ng General Luna. Naku po, every time na magmumura si General Luna, exactly the words that Duterte will use a year later. Paulit-ulit, no? And for years to come, talagang palakpakan lahat. Pak, yung cinema. Naalala niyo yun, di ba? Nanood kayo ng General Luna sa cinema. I never saw a cinema as packed. The only time na feeling ko medyo ka-level siya, yung nanood kami ng Samurai X. Ayan, yung mga medyo mas matatandang millennials, alam niyo na nostalgic din yung Samurai X. Love na love namin si Kenshin Himura. Yung mga ganun, okay. At sabi ko nga, si Kenshin Himura, medyo may political background yan kasi this is about the fall of the Tokugawa era, major restoration, yung painful transition of Japan into modernity. So you see all of the drama, that kind of last samurai drama going on there. But anyway, going back. May mga comment dyan. Ito ka na naman, Richard. Ang daming ad-lib. Guys, this is not a 2-minute, 4-minute discussion. If you want to have that, go and watch my interviews. In 3 minutes, I capture a whole book if it's necessary. This is a meta. In meta po, we're talking, we're having a dialogue, we're having a good time. Nagpasa ba kayo ng Socratic dialogues? Ang Socratic dialogues po ay hindi yung, andyan kaagad yung, synchronic analysis na naka-matrix na this is what. No. He slowly builds up the drama, the dialogue. So, platonic po ang approach natin dito. Ayan, aminin ko na. My approach is platonic. Diba? Ang ginagawa po natin sa meta dito is that we start with something all of us can relate to, and then based on that, we build up. So medyo inductive approach tayo. We build up and come up with some general ideas about our democracy, our country, about Twitter, about hamburger, about, I don't know, whatever you want to talk about, right? So, Socratic pong approach natin. Hindi tayo Aristotelian. Kasi, basta, alam niyo na this. Baliktad. Actually, Aristotelian ang approach ko. But the way I approach it, Aristotelian, kasi deductive yung actually Socratic, to be honest. But I do it in a dialogical, Platonic way. So anyway, hybrid ang ginawa ko. So minix ko ang Aristotelian and Platonic approach. Okay. Meta tayo eh. Gusto ko eh. Yan ang aking So I mixed Aristotelian with Socratic approach. Instead of starting deductive, we go inductive, but I use symposium-style dialogue. Okay, anyways. Just forget lahat ng sinabi ko. Balikan natin ulit si... Ayan. Balikan natin si Andre para ma-relax na kayo. Ayan, no. Just forget about everything I said. Yes, I am essentially mixing Platonic and Aristotelian approach with a little bit of... Yeah, with a little bit TikTok. Yeah! Yan, okay. Okay na tayo. Yan. Relax na kayo dyan. Okay, relax. May nagtatroll ba dyan? Saan? Sino nagtatroll? Kunin niyo yung pangalan. Ano tayo ngayon? Zero tolerance policy. Alis ka na dito. Block. Wala tayong oras sa basura dito. Seryoso tayo dito. Yan, okay. Yeah. GMRC. Sino presidente? GMRC. Yan, okay. Oy! Respeto kayo Seryoso to. Okay. Ginawa ko lang yan para di kayo ma-overwhelm dun sa mga ek-ek natin dyan sa Platonic. Kasi meron akong dialectical synthesis ng dalawang yan. Okay. Ito na naman, manlanggam na naman dito, nilalanggam na naman ako eh. Ba't kayo nagagalit? Nasuspend yung account na... Okay, balikan natin to. Okay. So, balikan natin si General Luna kasi feeling ko talaga ang laki ng, hindi ko naman sinasabi na kasalanan, pero ang laki ng unwitting contribution nung character, nung portrayal of the character of General Luna by John Arcilla dun sa tinatawag natin authoritarian nostalgia, what I also termed as strongman syndrome, And here in the article, I called it the General Luna phenomenon. I defined it as an unmediated, meaning hindi masyadong na-process, almost visceral, meaning medyo galing dito, fascination with strongmen as supposed secular saviors. Yung idea na naku po, pag meron tayo parang General Luna, nagmumura, inaaway, ganon, maging okay na tayo, palaban na tayo, maayos na lahat, one man alone can do it. And I think many people completely forgot a lot of things about that movie too. In fact, in that movie, sabi nung isa, sira na ba yung botones? Hindi pa naman, okay pa naman. Oo. May sale ulit sa punta natin. Walang ya. Ba't nyo pinapansin yung mga botones ko? Seryoso tayo nag-uusap. Ayan tayo, itong mga kakamping. Alam mo, pag nag-in-person concert na tayo, yung mga naglalait sa akin dyan, naku po, meron tayong spotlight. Si nilait. Ayan, joke lang. Oh, God willing one day. Who knows? Baka naman, pwede tayo gawa ng, Meta Conference. Yan. Pwede tayo mag-talks dyan. Ayan, in person, meet and greet, mga ka-meta. Tapos mag-launch na tayo ng party list natin. Vlogger party list. Imbitahin ko na yung mga vloggers. Tapos si Andrew E. ang kakanta. Yan, ulitin natin, ha. Yan, natin dyan. Yan, kanta natin dyan sa Meta Conference. Yan, okay. Okay, balikan natin, ha. Okay. So, kaya, pinapanood ko talaga si John Arcillas na matagal. Na bakit? Bakit ganon? Parang pinasikat mo tuloy yung tatay style. So, I think it really activated this visceral fascination with strongmen, which is the great man of history phenomenon. You can Google that. O, yan. Paki-Google, ha. Next time, pag-usapan natin yan. Alam ko, dapat pinag-usapan din natin sa Immanuel Kant and Voltaire and all. Pero maybe next time na lang ng more kasi medyo komplikado eh. Ayaw natin yun. Ito. Great man of history. Paki-research yan, ha. Ito yung concepts. Ayan. The great man theory. Ito ay kay Carlyle. Right? Galing to kay... Yan. Ito. Paki-Google yan. Paki-research yan. The great man theory. Diyan talaga galing at this is not unique to the Philippines. Maraming bansa may ganito. Yung idea na it takes a single person, unfortunately it used to be patriarchal tayo, so purong men ang inisip. That should be the great human or whatever. Yung idea na one person alone, si Thomas Carlyle, no, dun sa series of lectures niya na present niya in Edinburgh. This is centuries ago. Parang diniscuss na yung mga great men of history, whether it's Jean-Jacques Rousseau in the realm of ideas, whether it's the prophetic figures, whether it's Napoleon the Great in the political realm. Ito yung mga nagde-drive ng history. But if you guys bother to read itong War and Peace ni Tolstoy, first pages pa lang, he destroys that idea. The idea that many people forget that there wouldn't have been any Napoleon had there not been a strong French, army, military, which is not a product of Napoleon's genius per se. It's a product of centuries of institution building and state building. That Napoleon couldn't have mobilized yung Grand Armée and all of that if there was no sense of Frenchhood and collective identity, which again was built over centuries and all. So the problem with a lot of fascination with great men of history is that you tend to forget, kumbaga parang excited ka dun sa chef, but you forget all of yung mga ibang nagtrabaho sa kitchen. You forget the fact that yung mga nag-contribute dun sa ingredients na pumunta sa pagkain. You forget the fact that yung chef, kinuha yung ideas about sa ingredients sa ibang chefs, sa isang school, sa isang academy. You forget all of that and you give all of the credit to just that chef who knows how to present himself, right? Kamusta naman dyan, Elon Musk. Aggressive takeover, Tesla, get all the credit. Yan. Okay, so you get what I'm saying here. So for me, the General Luna phenomenon was very much along the lines of Thomas Carlyle's notion of the great man of history, right? So for me, it was important for him to make that speech because I think it kind of, I won't say vindication. I won't say repentance. Ayoko naman gamitin yung mga words na yan. But I think maganda na yung character na portray kay General Luna mismo ay nagsasabi sa atin na siguro ang mga leaders na kailangan natin ay hindi. Tama na yan, Andrew na yan. Mamaya na yan. Yan ang magiging ano natin, and true. And true, in true, and true. Okay. Na-emphasize na, the leaders we need are leaders who are actually dedicated to state building, institution building, and all of those things. Alright? Okay. Sabi naman ni Dipoy, daddy complex. Zaddy. Grabe, Zaddy nang tawag sa akin ngayon. Matanda na daw ako. Zaddy. Si Zaddy. Zaddy Idar. Yan. Okay. Now, why did I use the term a second chance? Hindi na yung bukas na lang kita mamahalin. Okay. Because, first of all, katulad ng pinag-usapan natin noon, yes, okay, let me read what I said. Thanks to sincere leadership of Corazon Aquino, and I clarified, a widow with no background in high-stakes politics, we managed to lurch away from bankrupt dictatorship. And let me be very clear. At some point, Cory Aquino had the revolutionary powers to be a dictator herself, but she chose not to. But instead, what she chose to do was to pave the way for the promulgation of a new democratic constitution. But, let's be very clear. The reality, however, is that, yung mga natin dyan, mga antmanos, is that the post-EDSA regime that replaced the Marcosian nightmare remained woefully wanting, largely failing to embody the great Republican ideals that animated the People Power Revolution 3 decades ago. Absent radical reforms and transformational leadership, well beyond Corazon Aquino. No? So it's unfair to just blame her for everything. After all, she was not a career politician. She was not in charge of the military. She was not... Yeah, at some point you could say, does she even control the military with all of the coups and everything like that? Nonetheless, maraming kulang. Yung sa land reform, daming kulang. Doon sa debt cancellation, dapat kinancel natin yung mga debts na kinuha naman ng mga cronies ni Marcos. Sila nga nag-benefit and their science. And then tayong mga ordinaryong tao nagbabayad niyan and the interest rate for decades. For heaven's sake, that's insanity. That's crazy. That should have been canceled. Katulad ng sinabi ni Prof. Munsod, she was advising the government. But no, may mga dyan, mga dilawan doon sa loob. No, we have to impress the international community. We have to give an idea of response. Yan, tuloy Hindi ito, seryosang, hindi ito beauty queen pageant when you talk about international diplomacy. It's a serious fact. We're not here to impress the world. We're here to make sure we defend our national interests. At ang national interest natin noon was to call for the cancellation of those debt na hindi natin ginawa. Bakit? Kasi nakinig tayo doon sa mga supine na, I won't use the word craven, but ay nako mga tao na dapat na-prioritize yung interest ng bayan natin. In fact, you know what? 10 years ago, I quite remember it vividly. Meron yung parang channel na parang Asian movies lang nandun. And I was watching a Japanese movie. And that Japanese movie was really, this is historical movie, no? This is about MacArthur's occupation of Japan after the defeat of the Japanese, after yung nuclear bomb and everything was dropped. And then there's a scene whereby a Japanese bureaucrat goes to the room and seeks for a meeting with MacArthur. At ito si MacArthur, yung mga hulog niya. Si MacArthur, ay syempre mayabang, nakaupang gano'n. Ginagano niya. What do you have to say, man? Ganyan. Tapos yung Japanese, biglang tinanggal niya yung gun niya, pinoint out niya kay MacArthur. So, syempre, nagwala yung mga yan. So, lahat ng mga guards nakapoint sa kanya. Then, the next thing he did is that he pointed the gun at himself and said, give my country money, loan, so that makaka-recover kami dito sa war. So, and then, he sang, medyo, nag-goosebump ako just remembering. Then he went on singing, I'm not sure, was that the national anthem of Japan or whatever? He went on singing the national anthem of Japan, etc., right? And then I think he shot himself afterwards or something like that. And then after that, of course, this is a bit of dramatization. MacArthur said, okay, mga seryosong tao to mga Hapon, you want to have them on your side. And you want Japan to recover as soon as possible so that we have a strong ally against the Soviet Union. So when the Americans saw the Japanese patriotism, going there, risking his life, and showing how much patriotic they are, and they want their country to recover from the war as soon as possible, nagblink yung America. So America gave support to Japan and allowed Japan to benefit in many ways. And yes, of course, downside of that was that the Philippines' reparations was not paid as much as possible. But it's a complicated issue. Now, we know they did the same thing in Germany, in Europe, under the Marshall Plan, etc. But this is my point. If you look at the critical junctures in our history, our bureaucrats, diplomats, a lot of them did not do their job. They were there to impress the international community. They were there to think about their career after they resign. They were there about all of the things that you shouldn't prioritize. Or sariling career ang inisip. Kaya tayo na ganun. Kausap ko si Ramos, President Ramos, a few years ago. Actually, just before pandemic. You know, I've interviewed President Arroyo, Tita Arroyo. Of course, I've met President Duterte. I had conversation with President Aquino. I had some extensive conversation with President Ramos, among others. And one of the things that came up to me was, for instance, bakit wala tayong lighthouse na ginawa dyan sa Scarborough Shoal? Ba't wala tayong ginawang Scarborough Shoal lang lighthouse? And from what I know, base dun sa mga statements ng, I think, National Security Advisor ni Ramos, etc., is the person who was in charge of that, I think sa DFA yung taong yan, sabi na, hindi, huwag tayo mag-build ng lighthouse, etc., kasi it will make us look like aggressors, etc. Tapos itong tao na to, yung pala, may inisip siya na career dun sa UN or something. So he didn't want to put his, essentially, thumb on something that could later on undermine his career trajectory. In the meantime, na-undermine yung interest ng Pilipinas. Because I would argue, 100%, had the Philippines built a lighthouse dyan sa Scarborough Shoal, we could have completely avoided the whole crisis in 2012. Because once meron kang tao dyan, with sundalo and all, katulad ng meron tayo sa Pag-asa, the Chinese would not have dared to attack it. Because that could have automatically activated the MDT or forced the Americans to respond. But because wala tayong presence anything there, yan, nagpadala lang sila sa armada, niloko tayo, wala, boom. Wala na. Finish na. So you get what I'm saying here. If sana, people like Ma'am Winnie Munsut were put in charge of negotiating our key economic interests with the international community after the 1996 revolution, if yung mga tao, if real patriots, strong character real patriots were in charge of making sure na hindi tayo magbayad ng odious debt. There's a legal definition for that. There's a legal framework on odious debt and cancellation of odious debt. We could have avoided so much economic burden for the Filipino people. Right? Tanongin niya si Ma'am Munsot, and alam mo, bati si Teddy Boy, may sinasabi na siyang nung isang araw sa ganitong issue na yan. Gusto ko mag-Android para masira na yung ano natin. Balikan natin. No, because this is a very serious issue. So I always remember the Japanese guy in that movie. He goes to MacArthur, points the gun at him, and when he knows he's surrounded, they're going to kill him. He pointed the gun at himself. He sang a national anthem and said, please give us the money so that my country can recover. And don't worry, we'll pay it back to you. We'll be strong again. We will be great again. And we'll be a great ally of your countries. Now, of course, it was dramatization, but I won't be surprised. That's more or less how Japanese were negotiating for Americans to help them and not take them for granted. In 1986, when we had that revolution, when pinalis natin yung dictatorship, the world loved us. The world was proud of us. We inspired people in Eastern Europe. 3 years later, to have their own version of it, hence the fall of the Berlin Wall in the peaceful way. We had the world opinion on our side. We should have called for the cancellation of those debts, but we didn't. I can go on and on. The other thing, we had a revolutionary moment where we could have called for total ban on any sort of talagang next level dynasties. Talagang very clear. Dapat dun sa Constitution, boom, straight to the point. And then, dapat meron tayo, clear laws against party defections, anti-defection laws, para hindi magbalimbingan, butterfly effect, making joke out of a party system. Common sense. Runoff elections. Bakit walang runoff elections? Hindi ko talaga maintindihan. Paki-explain sa akin. That is what I call, dilawan moves, right? Yung mga ganun compromised yung expression of the revolutionary spirit of EDSA in 1986. And that essentially lay down the ground for long-term stagnation and all sorts of problems we see. Now, this is not an opinion. Let me give you numbers. So as I mentioned in my article, as I've mentioned in all my works and all of that, absent radical reforms and transformational leadership, the post-Marcosian era saw more than 80% of elected legislative offices dominated by self-dealing political dynasties. And you were expecting these political dynasties to pass an enabling law against political dynasties? I mean, wow, genius. I mean, meanwhile, lopsided economic policies enabled the 40 richest families to gobble up to 76% of newly created wealth in recent memory. This is an astonishing level of inequality and wealth concentration which has made a mockery out of our democratic aspirations embodied by the 1986 EDSA Revolution. Now, that is why, di ba, remember class talaga eh. Di ba, pinag-usapan natin yung survey, yung blue maliit, yung yellow malaki. Bakit malaking yellow? So against the backdrop of widespread disaffection and despondency, a 2020 Pew Research Center survey showed that almost half of Filipinos said, quote, most elected officials do not care, unquote, about ordinary citizens. A survey 3 years earlier said that, by Pew Survey also, only 15% of Filipinos were fully committed to liberal democratic politics. That is why my argument always is the only way to save our democracy, as imperfect as it is to advocate for a genuine democracy. The very thing that was not implemented after the 1986 revolution and was corroded over and over again, you know which administrations, right? And no, just blaming the Aquinos is completely unfair and misses the point. I'm sorry, right? Look at the highest economic growth we had. I mean, it's not magic and all of that, but still. And it was not inclusive, but still. But look at the worst days we have had in the past 30 years. Kaya LENI's historic candidacy represents arguably the second chance for the Filipino people to realize the true aspirations of the 1986 EDSA Power Revolution, itself the upshot of a century-old struggle dating back to the days of Rizal and General Luna. Kaya nga para sa akin, dapat ito this should be a must reading for all Filipinos. Please, basahin nyo to. Napakamahalaga to mga kameta. Because dito na talaga makikita na our struggle for democracy didn't start with Ninoy Aquino. Didn't start with Aquinos. Didn't start with, I don't know, sino ba? Si Manuel Quezon or whatever. No, this is a more than a century-old struggle. Kaya basahin nyo to kasi napakaganda yung sinulat ni Joaquin. God bless him. Definitely the best writer we had after Rizal, right? Or since Rizal. God bless his soul. And of course, si Manong Frankie, another great one. So let me be very clear. As I wrote, from the crowd that wept upon the execution of Padre Jose Burgos and his patriotic colleagues in 1872, to the thousands of those who heeded Bonifacio's calls for a mass revolt against the Spanish colonizers, and all the way to the millions who solemnly commemorated Benigno Ninoy Aquino's Benigno Aquino Jr.'s martyrdom, Jan sa Luneta, the dream for a better Philippines has never died. So this is not about just EDSA Revolution. This is about Padre Jose Burgos, who wanted more autonomy and respect for Filipinos. This goes back to Andres Bonifacio, who wanted more respect and autonomy for Philippine people. This goes back to General Luna, who fought against Americans who betrayed our coalition against Spain just to be our new colonizers. This is about Ninoy Aquino. This is about Bonifacio. This is about all of these people in one way or another wanted the same thing for the Philippines. National collective dignity and competent democratic leadership. This is consistent through and through. We didn't get it. We didn't get it fully. Let's be honest about it. Kaya nga maraming tao ay skeptical sa demokrasya sa ating bansa. But we still may have another chance to realize the fundamental aspirations and dreams of our struggle, our century-old struggle for democracy, for a better Philippines. At doon sa mga nakikita ko na nagsusupport kay LENI, hindi ito yung mga tao na nagsusupport doon sa supine reformism, half-baked democracy, oligarchic, co-opted democracy. No. These are people who want a real, genuine democracy for all Filipinos. Hindi lang sa middle class, hindi lang sa Ilocano, hindi lang sa Bisaya, hindi lang sa Mindanao. No, for all Filipinos. That is what I've been saying. Alright? Ayan. Kung may mic drop, meron tayong ballpen drop. Yan. Mont Blanc drop. Ito na naman, okay. Okay, so medyo mag-break muna tayo ulit. Balikan natin to si... Ito. Yeah. Yan, bagong Pilipinas. Okay, so level tayo. So yan ha. Please, basahin nyo to. After you read this, yung love nyo sa Pilipinas ay magiging times 1 million. Promise. Hindi ko alam yung tala na gold million bang bibigay. Hindi ko alam yan. But ito, promise, yung love nyo ay magwa 1 million level. Alright? Ibang level. Tingnan mo yung mga, just look at my notes and all. I mean, it's just so beautifully written. It's such an important piece of historical analysis by someone who was never trained. I mean, you could see all the notes I have here, like all of this. Nagkataon lang na pink and ano, hindi ito political, ha? 2 years ago pa, hindi ko alam yung kulay ng mga, pink and, okay. Kasi yun lang mga highlights na meron ako. Yan, okay, yan. Ayan, saya. Sabi ni Andrew E. Yan. GMRC, sino presidente? Sino, ayan, vice-presidente, Tito Boy. So, ayan, okay. Alright. O, tama na yung drama natin, ha? Ayan na. Gawin tayo yun. Nalpasin. Okay? Ano, ito na nga, A Question of Heroes nga, Nick Joaquin. Wait lang, tinatanong mo ba yung kay Andrew E. sa TikTok? Ano ulit yan? Ito na yung favorite ko talaga yung isa, yung gumaganon. Tapos yan. Okay. Check nyo dyan sa Zalora. Meron yan for sure. Mamaya, ubus na yung Zalora. Mag-thank you kayo. Anvil, mag-thank you kayo sa akin. Nag-endorse na ako ng book. God bless Nick Joaquin. God bless Philippines. God bless Rizal, Ninoy, Bonifacio, General Luna, lahat ng lumaban para sa ating bansa. God bless you all. God bless sa lahat ng mga Pilipino, sa lahat ng tao na hindi nawalan ng pag-asa sa ating bansa. God bless sa mga tao na kasama natin dito sa kilusan. Talagang kilusan na tayo. Para sa pagbabago, tunay na pagbabago, magandang pagbabago, matinong pagbabago, hindi bara-bara na pagbabago, hindi tatay time na magbabago. Yan. Okay? Salamat talaga. Magbabay-bye na ako kasi balikan ko itong ano ko eh. Yan. Balikan ko yan eh. Medyo na-analysis na tayo dyan. Okay? Yan. Nalpasin. Awanin. Okay? So this is not about just 1986. This is not just about Cory. This is not just about Aquinos. This is about the century-old struggle that goes back all the way dun sa araw na umiyak lahat ng tao nung na-execute si Jose Borgos at yung mga ibang pare na lumaban para sa ating dignidad, no? And more representation for us against our colonial masters. Now, back then, we had the Spanish to oppress us. Today, alam na this. Perfect attendance time! Kamusta kayo dyan? So enjoy. I hope you enjoyed our show today. And looking forward to more discussions. God bless you and thank you so much dun sa mga nagbigay ng stars. Oh, wala na akong sinabi. Nagbigay na kayo ng stars. Alam niyo na. You know the drill. Alright. Okay. Maraming salamat. God bless. And talk to you soon.